Hello and welcome to How to Deal When the Shit Gets Real podcast. I'm Rietta, and today I'm here with Lisa Heacock. So Lisa, how do you deal when the shit gets real? Or just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. So I worked in corporate for a long time. I'm from Seattle, but I live in the UK. And when I experienced what we're going to be talking about, it changed the trajectory of my life. And so I'm happy to tell you how I dealt and continue to deal with it.
I can only imagine, because when I first read your bio, I was like, my goodness, this woman has been through the ringer.
Yeah. Yes, indeed.
So.
I mean, I didn't experience a lot of loss in my life. So, I lost my grandmother and my aunt when I was young, but, I was young. So it wasn't until 2018 was when the shit hit the fan, so to speak.
Yeah. I mean, I guess we'll go ahead and dive right in. So in 2018, you had mentioned in your pre-interview that you lost 12 loved ones in a 22-month period. How did you deal with so many profound losses?
Yeah, it was extremely difficult to navigate, especially when you're talking about compound grief. So it's, one loss after another. And it's not just the loss of loved ones through the death. It's all of the hundreds of micro losses as well. So in 2018, in January, actually, I received a call that my niece, who on my ex-husband's side of the family had passed away. I mean, she was in her early 30s. She had a hereditary illness, but you don't really expect that she's going to pass. And then a week later, I received the dreaded call. Of course, having family that is in Seattle, and I am 4,000 miles away. And, you're dreading that call. It's always in the back of your mind. Like, oh my God, it is going to happen at some point. And my mom, I chatted with my mom, and she had told me that my dad was diagnosed with brain cancer. And yeah, and he had surgery and they couldn't remove any of it. And so I quit my job at a law firm and went and lived with my parents for the 7 months until my dad passed, because, I wasn't just helping my dad. I was there for my mom and my family. And I don't regret a single moment. But my dad then passed away, and I came back to the UK. And how did I deal with that? I shut the curtains. I did not want to talk to anyone except for like my closest of friends. I was tired, those losses where you're watching someone that you love. Like I was very close to my parents die. And that was when, kind of the earth opened up and swallowed me whole. But it wasn't just the loss of my dad. I had lost friends in between that time. And then my mom came to visit. I'd say maybe 7 or so months after my dad passed. She stayed here for a couple months. I mean, they'd come to this country a lot, but it was the first time that she came by herself. It was heart-wrenching, watching her walk off the plane by herself. So she stayed for a couple months. We traveled around and we had a great time. And then I dropped her off at Manchester Airport and hugged her. She was crying. I was keeping it together, trying to be strong. And I did not know that would be the last time that I would hug my mom. She passed away in her sleep several months later. I mean, we talked every day, every single day. And she wasn't answering her phone and she wasn't answering her messages and she wasn't. So I was like, oh my God, like everybody get over there. And she had passed away peacefully. Panic. Yes. I was like, oh my God, when was the last time you talked to mom? When was the last time you talked to my mom? Like something's wrong. I just knew. And then I was, waiting for somebody to call me back to tell me she had passed peacefully in her sleep, but it was 14 months after my dad. And yeah. And so when my mom passed away, the thing I knew I then needed, because I had lost several loved ones by this time, was I reached out to a bereavement counselor. Like that was my port of call because I just didn't know what to do. And I'm pro therapy. So I was like, right.
Mhm.
I was so fortunate to have a wonderful therapist. And then 2 months after my mom passed away, I got the worst call in the middle of the night, that my 24-year-old son-in-law, Jack, had passed away from a fall in front
Oh
of my
no.
daughter. Yeah.
Oh
And
goodness.
yeah. And we were 2 hours away and, driving in the middle of the night just to get to her. Um, so that, yeah, so that threw me over the edge, really. That was the last of the many who had passed. So that was, yeah, the 12th person in 22 months, and trying to navigate that was really difficult.
I can only imagine. I mean, grief is hard already. And then, like you said, when you compound it, you made a comment about micro grief. And I do like that explanation, but can you elaborate on it more what you mean by micro grief?
Yeah. So the way I see it, especially if you're caring for somebody who has an illness, you have this anticipatory grief, right? You know that they're going to pass away. You don't know when, you don't know the situation, but you lose bits of that person along the way. Especially if they can no longer. My dad was like, he was larger than life and busy all the time, and watching him decline to sitting in a chair and falling and confused and all of those losses, and then watching my mom shrink, literally physically and emotionally shrink as she watched the love of her life dying, that there were losses of so many different losses, and not just for the carers but the person who is dying. And
Yeah.
so it's the loss of a relationship that you had, loss of communication, loss of health, loss of, when people are grieving the loss of a partner, there's tons of losses as well, whether it's a sudden loss and or someone has an illness and you have the anticipatory grief or the sudden loss. There is a loss of a home, loss of finances, loss of your health, loss of your independence, I mean, there are multiple losses. And so when we think of grief and loss, we think of death, but
Mhm.
actually there's so many losses within those losses.
Yeah. No, absolutely. The way you described that makes perfect sense to me. And you had mentioned with your mom, like you kind of just knew, and that kind of struck me because I feel very attached to my mom. Like a lot of times, like the same kind of things happen to us at the same time, and we're like, "Oh my god, that's crazy." So, did you kind of know, like deep down, that your mom had passed? Did you like feel that connection had kind of been like severed almost?
Yes, it was such a strange experience because I hadn't kind of clicked. I'd went to work and I was away with my daughter, and it hadn't kind of clicked that she's not reading my messages. And then it was Monday after work, I'm eating dinner, and it just hit me that my mom was gone. And I knew, it was one of those knowing that I knew that she had passed. So when my brother was going over there, he's like, just it's okay. Like, I said, no, it's not okay. I know. I just
Mhm.
knew. But of course, my brother and my mom's best friend had to go into the house. Like, I'm over here in the UK. And my brother's biggest fear was finding my mom, like something violent had happened, like he didn't know
Yeah.
what he was going to walk into. So in many ways, we were grateful that she was just in her chair watching crime shows, like her legs were crossed, like she just went
Just
so
passed.
peacefully. Yeah.
Yeah.
And really, you know, yeah, she was keeping going with her life. She was traveling. She's the most positive person that you could ever imagine, but she was just brokenhearted.
Yeah. I I definitely believe in that because um my grandpa passed away in 2010, right before Thanksgiving. And then my grandma, his wife, passed away right before Christmas. Like she didn't even really, she made it like a month and that was it without
Wow.
him.
You hear it a lot, don't you? And
Yeah,
it makes sense. So there's this sudden loss, which is just horrifying. But then there's this idea that they're together. Like that
hmm,
makes sense to me. Not that I didn't want them here on earth, but
of
that
course.
to me was they're together. That this is how it's always meant to be. And so it's not that it doesn't make the grief less painful. It just means like, okay, you guys are together now.
Yeah, it's kind of a way to help you cope with it.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
You also mentioned in your pre-interview that you not were only carrying your own grief, but the grief of others. So how did you decide to take on that extra burden of not only carrying your grief, but the ones of others around you?
Yeah, I don't think it's a decision and certainly not a choice. I think it is
True.
just reality, right? Like it happens. So I was carrying my mom's grief because I was watching my mom grieving. So I'm taking on her grief while I'm also grieving. So I'm trying to be the strong one and putting things together and making sure my dad's taken care of and like my mom's taken care of. So even though my mom would say, you don't have to be strong for me, it was really important that I cared for her. Then when my son-in-law passed away, I mean, I'm a mom. Like I got to get to my daughter. And her whole life in a split second was destroyed in a
Hmm.
flash. And I had to make sure that she and my oldest daughter, who lost her brother-in-law, um, whom she loved, were okay. So even though there was no mom fix for this, like I couldn't just go, oh, it'll all be okay. I just had to
Hmm.
be there. There was no fixing it. So I felt the weight of their grief and their loss. There were others who passed away, friends' children, and the friends and their partners. I had to really be careful not to carry their grief as well. So there were some that I was able to go, no, that's their grief to carry. I'm here, but I
Hmm.
cannot carry that. But when you're talking about your parents, your
Of course.
son-in-law, your children, completely different. Um, so the weight of that was very difficult.
I can only imagine. And it probably led to a breaking point, I assume. So what was that final breaking point that you were like, I can't carry this anymore?
Yeah. I mean, I had a wonderful therapist, like I said, a bereavement counselor for a year and a half. And that was really important for me because she was quite action oriented. She knew that I needed like homework to do and things to do, right? Because I couldn't just come in, talk, and then leave. I needed other stuff.
Hmm.
But I honestly, my fear, and I said to her, is that I'm going to be in a ball in a corner and I'm never going to get up. Like I'm never going to recover. So I said,
Yeah.
I feel like I'm going crazy. And she's like, what does that look like to you? And I'm like, I'll never get up. But I kept getting up. And
Hmm.
even if it was just to brush my teeth, like sometimes that's all you can do in the heavy grief. Um, and then I grabbed hold of tons of different things, different modalities. But I went through a very amicable divorce as well. So there were a lot of breaking points. You know what it was you the grief and the loss shines a light on areas of your life where you're really unhappy and you
Hmm.
realize and recognize. So for me, it wasn't necessarily like a one breaking point. It felt like tons of breaks. But it was more like, aha, life is short, life is fragile, I'm unhappy, you're unhappy, like I have to go. And I did leave my husband at the time of 28 years. I mean, amicably, he helped me pack, like he helped me move. And like a year after we lost Jack. I didn't do it right away, but it was certainly
Mhm.
something that was already happening. And then with the losses, it just became really real. And so, like I said, it's not really like there was some breaking point. I tried everything to stay afloat, and it was just life is short. I gotta like try to live this life, whatever I can, whatever time I have. I can't be miserable.
Yeah, I mean, like you already said, life is too short. Why do you want to spend it in a place you don't want to be?
Yep.
And you mentioned therapy, which I love that therapy was helping you. Is there other ways that you use to help heal on this journey besides therapy?
Yeah, absolutely. I always tell people like I did everything. Like I was so open to everything. From like sound bath healing
Ooh.
to kinesiology to like all these kind of energy things, Reiki, chiropractor, massage. Like I went to mediums. I only a couple that I really trust. Um, I did. I threw every. I went to Zumba. I went hiking. I did everything I could. Honest to God, I'm trying to think if there's something I didn't do. I'm sure there was, but I was just so open because, again, I was so afraid that I was never going to recover. So I knew enough to know that trauma and grief sit in your body, and I didn't want to
Mhm.
end up with an autoimmune disease or something. So I was trying everything I could to get it out of me. But my therapist also said, Lisa, sometimes it's okay to just not do anything. Like I was just felt like I had to like sit in it, sit in the grief, sit in it, let it wash over me, work through it, work, 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 work. And she said, it's okay sometimes to just say not today. Like, and so then I would just put my hoodie over my head, watch Netflix, eat chocolate and popcorn, and do nothing. So those were just some of the many things I did.
I need to hear more about this sound bath therapy. What was that like? Did you like it?
Yes, I did. I did. Yeah. So it's very meditative. So it's like a lot of like kind of a meditation. So if you go to a really good class, so they'll be all over America, they're all over the UK. Um, and it's great. It's such an amazing class to go to. You take your yoga mat, a pillow, a blanket, like and water. Like it's the best kind of exercise ever. You just lay there. And so so some instructors will have these big gongs. One of the gals I went to had just massive gongs, and then others have like bowls and different types of sound, so it's a very much energy. I didn't know what to expect, but people fall asleep in it, so it's just this kind of, not, this doesn't go bam bam on a gong. It's like this noise and this vibration, and puts people in a very calming state. And that's what I needed. I needed to take this cortisol that was shooting out of my body like as high as possible, and my stress level and my grief. And I needed to calm it. I needed to just drop it. So that I highly recommend you find a class near you. It is actually really beautiful. And sometimes it's hard to shut your brain off, but then
Mhm.
like sometimes you just kind of like wake up and then be like, oh, it's like sleeping. And some people have different experiences. For me, it was just about calming my nervous system.
I'm glad I asked you too, because in my mind, I was picturing like you in a bathtub and they were like making the water like vibrate or something. So, not actually in water. Good to know.
No, yeah, exactly. Like you're bathing in this sound. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm gonna have to try that. That actually sounds really interesting.
It is. It is. And like I said, you might have to do it a couple times just to kind of like get into that. But they usually start out with meditation and kind of calm your nervous system. And then it is really, I mean, I enjoy it.
It sounds fantastic. So and it makes sense. Like you said, you just need that quiet and that calm.
Yep. Yeah.
If you could do anything differently, would you?
Do you mean in my grieving or in my healing?
How about just whatever first popped to your mind when I asked the question?
Well, I said stupid things. I mean, don't we all?
Yes.
Um, and so part of the work that I do is educating people on how to support those who are grieving.
Mhm.
But there's some things I've said that I'm just like, oh my God, that was the dumbest thing. And so I go back to the person and go, like, sorry, that was just stupid. And of course, they give you so much grace. Um, Really, no, I don't think, other than saying stupid things, but I just learned and I apologize. I apologize a lot, right? But I think I wouldn't change anything as far as how I coped and the decisions that I made. Some of the best decisions I made came from that place of needing to now create a life of passion and purpose around my pain. But I would say, some people, when we talk about like finding meaning after loss, I would never say, oh, I'm glad that all those people have passed away because I am now who I am. Absolutely not. I would much rather have them back than learn the lesson of,
Mhm.
compound grief and even the job, even the work that I do. I'd much rather have them back, but it's not reality. So it's what do you do with it?
Yeah. I think myself, and I'm sure other people feel this way, it can be hard to know what to say to somebody who is grieving. So, do you have any words of advice of what people can say or what they can do to be supportive? Because sometimes those words are hard to find.
Yeah, they really are. And, it depends too on your relationship with that person. You might go to their door, like, I'm coming over because you're really close to them. And then others, you're a bit, you're not as close, you're a bit more removed. So, some of the things I think that's really important, because I think we are a little bit grief illiterate, but we are getting better, is to understand that we don't actually need to say anything. We can just be with the person if, again, you're close to them. Um, I when I tell people, message when you're messaging somebody, texting them, you found out that they've had this significant loss or they're grieving and you're just checking in with them, always start out with, you do not need to reply, but just know that I am here and that I love you and that, whatever it is, that they just feel supported, but they don't have the pressure of having to message you. Because if they're getting tons of messages, imagine they are in this grief fog, this grief brain. So now they're now worried that they're going to piss somebody off by not responding. You do not need to, you want to take that off of them. So you don't need to respond. If they do, they do, but they don't need to. And the other thing too, I say to people is, think about the daily things that you do or the weekly things that you do that just, you don't even think about it. You walk the dogs, you take the kids to school, you cook, you clean, you do your laundry, you do your hair. Like you do these things that we don't even think about. But when someone is grieving, brushing their teeth, like I said, is a chore. Getting out of bed sometimes is a chore. So if there's anything you can do to take that off of them, pick up their kids, take their kids to the sporting event, if they don't have kids, like, clean their house. There was a gal who was friends with my parents, and for 7 months, she every other day came and took the laundry, took the towels and the sheets, and then she'd bring the clean ones back and take that. She did it for 7 months. And
Oh,
yeah, and I've got some great friends here in this country. One of the 12 that I lost, they lost their 20-year-old son in a car accident. Happened to be my dad's birthday, first birthday without my dad.
oh,
Um, and their only child, they're not that that mattered, but their only child, they're just so wonderful family, and he was taken away like that in a car accident. And it was like, what do we do? So we put together some meals. People would just bring out, like, whether they ate it or not isn't the point, like, just they're
hmm,
not going to think about food. So buying food, I have somebody I know who used to go, I'm going grocery shopping. Do you need anything? And for a year and a half, they bought, they went grocery shopping for them. Because if you think about the practicality, you go into the grocery store and the checker goes, how you doing? Have a great day. Have a nice day. And you are deep in grief. You just really want to throat punch people. So
yeah,
it's probably safest that you stay home, but also you just don't want. Why is the world? I was talking to my daughter who lost her partner. He passed 5 years ago, a few days ago, and she said, I remember we were just like, why is the world spinning? Like, how is the earth still going? How are people still functioning and smiling and laughing? Don't they know that, like, the world has now ended for me?
hmm,
Like, and it's that kind of stuff. So if you can support people, those are kind of the do's. I mean, obviously there's don'ts as well, but those are some of the things you can say and or do to help.
beautiful. I love all that. I think that's fantastic, and it's a great point. I mean, you're not thinking about the basics. You're lost in that sea of grief.
Absolutely.
So, how did all of this lead to you becoming a holistic health coach?
Yes, so that is, it's so interesting. I was working. It was during COVID, and I'm just typing away, and weirdly, I just felt like Lisa, you need to be a life coach. And I was like, I don't even. I literally had to Google what a life coach was. I didn't even know what that was. So I thought, well, if I'm going to be that, then I should probably hire one. So that's another thing that I did, was hired a coach. But I went down all of the, certification, accreditation, and spent all my time getting all my hours in doing personal development. Right? Easy for me. That's easy. Like, here, are you feeling stuck? Like, do this thing. Here's what, and I can help people who are unhappy and unfulfilled. Like, that was me. So I can help you down this process. But there was this grief in the back, where I was like, oh, I don't want to deal with people who are grieving. Like, am I ready? And then I started niching as well in grief, and became a certified grief educator, because not only do I have the like now the education, I'm like the full on lived experience, right? But it took a while for me to think, am I okay? And actually, yeah, it is what it is. That is what happened. And I wouldn't look back. It is the most fulfilling thing, because I always feel like my parents were like this. They just served, and they served their community, and you keep moving forward, and you look back and help somebody else along. And that, for me, is what I was saying about creating a life of passion and purpose around the pain of grief and loss. It just doesn't go away. Like, you don't, that's another thing to say, like, how long will I grieve? Well, how long will they be gone? Forever. So you will, but you can fully live and fully grieve at the same time. Like, those two things can coexist. And so it's just, yeah, helping people process through their pain.
Has it been a rewarding process for you? I know at first you said it was kind of intimidating, but now that you're in the thick of it, has it been rewarding?
Yes, yes, because I would say, half of my clients are personal development, probably more than half, actually, probably 80% are kind of feeling stuck and unhappy, and they're grieving some sort of loss, whether it's empty nesting or loss of identity or whatever it is that they're feeling stuck. But then the grief, those who really, they're coming to me for grief coaching, whether that's someone has passed, to we just want to be heard, we want to be seen, we want to be validated. So when you're saying to somebody, you're not crazy, you're not broken, you are grieving, this is what it is, and the relief that people have is like, I'm not crazy, oh my god,
Mm-hmm.
I'm actually quite normal.
Yeah, I think that's all we really want to hear a lot of times is that we're just not alone in how we feel.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Was the medium helpful to you at all? Did you make contact with anybody that passed over?
I'm so glad you asked that. So this
I
wasn't
almost
anything.
forgot.
There wasn't a thing that I was really like ever interested in, or I never believed or anything. And then I had a friend who I trusted who said, if you're open to it, there's this man here in the UK. And I was like, okay. It was 30 minutes, and I just was like absolutely blown away because he didn't even know my name. It's not like you could Google the information. And the stuff that he was talking about my dad, I was just like, this was after my dad passed. And I was like, what? How would he know any of those? Nothing, to like this crazy weird detail that I've never told anyone. And then some other friends, the ones who lost their son, had a medium, Kat, and she is in London. And she's like a year booked out, right? Like so I've had several sessions with her. It is insane what she came up with. Like, what she described Jack's accident, she described me in the garage going through their stuff and how I came across his shirt. She's like, why is he giving me a white shirt? How? Nobody was there. Like, it was that kind of evidence. So I'm extremely picky, and who I would never just anybody, because I know there's charlatans out there, but she is like absolutely incredible. And I have to say that for me, part of my healing, this was probably the most powerful part of my healing, because the information that was given to me wasn't like, oh, they're in a better place, like, oh, they're good. Like, it was detailed, got their personality. I knew something was happening that I didn't quite get, but I was like, oh my God, I can't ignore that. So for me, that was the most powerful healing for me.
Ooh, I got goosebumps just hearing it. That's amazing.
Yeah, it was crazy. It was crazy.
All right, note to self for hopefully very future reference.
Yes, yes, indeed. Very future down the road. But she was amazing. So I would say to anybody, if they're open, it's just even if you're a little open to it, and then word of mouth, like, who do you trust? Because, like I said, there are people out there who will say something and you're like, I could have said that.
Yeah.
but not some of these other things. I just have story after story after story. But yeah, it was really powerful.
Oh, I love that. So, for anybody who does want to work with you and wants to get in touch with you, how can they do that?
The best way probably is my website, and it's holisticlifecoaching.org.uk. And there's all my contact details there. And Facebook is Holistic Life Coaching with Lisa Marie. So, and Instagram and all that. But if they go to my website, they can see all of that there as well.
Perfect. And there will be a link in the show notes. So, nice and easy access. We can just click on it. And is there any final advice or wisdom or quote that you want to leave my listeners with?
Do you know, I think I said it before, but my kind of mentor when I was going through my certification program, my grief certification, is David Kessler, and he is the grief expert in America, but all over the world. And he said, you can fully live and fully grieve at the same time. So with grief and guilt, grief and anger, they go hand in hand. But once you start to process through that, and to be honest, the other thing I would absolutely say, so you can do those things, surround yourself with people who are energy giving and not your energy draining vampires. So we all have them, right? You don't have any energy to give when you're grieving. You have nothing. You have to protect your energy. So I would shelf those friends or those family members until you're ready to bring them back in, or kick them off the shelf completely. Like there's just no time for them. So, and then your people, even if it's a small group, those are your people, and surround yourself with them.
Perfect. And what a beautiful place to end. Thank you so much, Lisa, for being here.
Thanks so much for having me.
And this is how to deal when the shit gets real, guys. I'll see you all next episode.